On June 6, 2023, Real Madrid legend Karim Benzema announced he was leaving the Spanish capital after 14 years of glorious service. Given Florentino Perez's pursuit of Kylian Mbappe, Benzema's departure wasn't seen as a surprise. That is, until we found out where he was going. Instead of joining the Premier League or coming home to France, Benzema decided to join Al Ittihad, the reigning champions of the Saudi Pro League. The decision was taken just 7 months after receiving his Ballon d'Or, and 5 months after Al Nassr's acquisition of Cristiano Ronaldo, the transfer that started this all, as Saudi Arabia looked to take over world football one superstar at a time, with N'Golo Kante and Koulibaly arriving from Chelsea as well. But who else is coming, and is any of this even sustainable, or will this just be another repeat of the Chinese Super League? Today we answer those questions as we break down how Saudi Arabia is buying football. Welcome back, guys. You're watching the Sideline Starters, and my name is Andy, first team all sideline. Drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and once you've done that, let's get started. It's hard to make sense of Saudi Arabia's short-term signings this summer without first understanding their long-term plans, which luckily for us have been compactly communicated through Vision 2030, a nationwide development program seeking to reduce the kingdom's economic dependency on oil, an exportation process that makes up 46% of the country's GDP. And while continued funding of urbanism and entertainment through cinema and the arts are part of this vision, very few sectors have proven more lucrative and socially paramount than the vehicle of world sport, and for the purposes of today's discussion, world football. In October of 2021, Premier League sleeping giant Newcastle United was acquired by a consortium led by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, in a deal worth over 300 million euros, a takeover that saw the Magpies go from a toxic club in the midst of a relegation battle to one of the 4 English teams competing in the Champions League. A remarkable turnaround that's taken less than 2 years in a hyper-competitive environment surrounded by powerful clubs with much more recent success. But Saudi Arabian influence in the Premier League wouldn't stop with Newcastle, as Riyadh-based club Al Nassr secured the signature of disgruntled Man United megastar Cristiano Ronaldo after he aired his grievances in a scathing interview with Piers Morgan. The biggest star in all of sports was presented to the Saudi people shortly after the conclusion of the 2022 World Cup, a competition that saw the Saudis shock future champions Argentina in the group stage. The kingdom left Qatar on a nationalistic high, and Ronaldo was signed to not just continue this momentum, but to take it to a completely different level, which he did. In the week before Ronaldo's arrival, Al Nassr had 853,000 followers on Instagram. Fast forward 6 months and the total is now 15.2 million, an increase of 1,700%. Al Nassr's follower count is now even higher than both Milan clubs and the official Bundesliga Instagram account. In an era where players are more powerful than the clubs they play for, Al Nassr landed a marketing behemoth, and one Ballon d'Or winner would make way for another, as the aforementioned Karim Benzema followed suit. And even though Lionel Messi was lured away to the MLS this summer, having him on board as Saudi Arabia's official tourism ambassador means that 3 of the last 4 Ballon d'Or winners have business relationships with the kingdom. And speaking of business relationships, there's a certain club that spearheaded more Saudi transfer activity this summer than anyone else. While Saudi Arabia were busy recruiting Ronaldo, Chelsea's new owner Todd Boehly was busy recruiting half the world, as the American businessman spent over 600 million euros across 2 transfer windows on the signings of 17 different players. Transfer activity that left all of us wondering how on earth could Chelsea spend so much money without violating financial fair play? And we arrive at the answer by first understanding that football players are assets, not expenses, and that assets can depreciate in value over time, with that decrease in value written off as a loss by football clubs through the process of player amortization, the accounting term used to describe the spreading of the transfer fee spent on a player based on the length of his new contract. Let's give an example to make things a little clearer. When Chelsea signed Enzo Fernandez for 122 million euros, they also gave him a 9-year contract. Player amortization allows Chelsea to take his transfer fee, divide it by his total contract length, and report that quotient as a loss, meaning Chelsea only lose 13.55 million euros a year throughout the duration of Enzo's contract. The longer a player's contract is, the smaller the loss that a club reports becomes. And given that UEFA's financial fair play system requires that clubs break even every 3 years, clubs are always looking for ways to reduce their losses to as small a figure as they possibly can. But that only helps Chelsea balance the books for players that are coming in, and still leaves them with one of the most bloated, overcrowded squads in the entire world. And what do you get when you take a club looking to sell half of its players and introduce them to a league looking to recruit well-established footballers? That's right, perfectly legal activity. At time of recording, Chelsea have already sold N'Golo Kante to Al Ittihad, Kalidou Koulibaly to Al Hilal, Hakim Ziyech to Al Nassr, and Edouard Mendy to Al Ahly. And I know some of you are thinking, Andy, what's wrong with that? It wouldn't be a problem if Chelsea sold 4 players to 4 different Italian teams now, would it? And you'd be right. Unless we found out that those Italian teams were all funded by an Italian investment fund who's also invested in Chelsea Football Club, then we might have a little bit of a problem, which is what appears to be going on between Chelsea and Saudi Arabia, as the kingdom's public investment fund is reported to be one of the many investors in Clearlake Capital, the private equity company brought in by Todd Boehly to be the majority shareholder of Chelsea Football Club. As you recall, the PIF already demonstrated their commitment to football given their acquisition of Newcastle, and they doubled down on this commitment in June by taking ownership of the Saudi Pro League's 4 biggest clubs, Al Ittihad, Al Hilal, Al Nassr, and Al Ahly, the same exact 4 clubs that acquired Chelsea's players in the transfers we previously mentioned. Now, could this all just be the uncanny synergy of supply simply meeting demand? Sure, I guess it's a position you could take. As football business expert Cristina Filippo told The Athletic, these sellers have faced difficulties, but then Saudi Arabia declared that it is now a buying market, and its clubs may be open to buying some of these unwanted but expensive players. And while we wait to see which way the Clearlake cookie crumbles, you can bet that the rest of the Premier League will be watching to see whose hand comes out of the cookie jar. But even if the Saudis do everything by the book, what's to prevent them from becoming the next Chinese Super League? The idea of football icons in the twilight of their career being used to enhance the reputation of a growing league is nothing new. Americans in the 1970s were introduced to soccer by the arrival of Pelé to the New York Cosmos, while the mid-2000s saw David Beckham lured to the LA Galaxy, in a transfer that gradually developed interest in the MLS, culminating in the signing of Messi to Miami this summer, some 20 years later. But success is never guaranteed in football, and the 2010s serve as our reminder of that, as we recall the collapse of the Chinese Super League. The mission was a pretty ambitious one: to propel one of the most populous nations on earth to the forefront of the world's most popular sport in less than 40 years. A plan Chinese President Xi Jinping would map out in his 2016 manifesto, a strategic roadmap that ended with his republic lifting the World Cup. And to China's credit, they put their money where their mouth was, quite literally, as the 2016-17 transfer window saw the Super League sign Ezekiel Lavezzi from PSG, Ramirez from Chelsea, Hulk from Zenit St. Petersburg, Carlos Tevez from Boca Juniors, and most shockingly, Oscar from the Blues as well. China actually spent more money in the 16-17 winter window than any league in the world, outspending England by more than 100 million euros. So what went wrong? Well, for starters, all of these signings were grossly overpaid and were earning more than some of the best players in the world, despite having less footballing ability and commercial value. It wasn't enough to just sign a player who was impressive on the pitch. In order to grow their league, China needed a player whose brand transcended football. Someone like Zlatan Ibrahimovic is a perfect example. The way his aura and personality put Ligue 1 on the map is a testament to the importance of brand value. I couldn't even tell you what Oscar's voice sounds like, or if Hulk has the brutish personality that his name suggests he does. But traveling thousands of miles to a league in its infancy meant that bloated contracts were the only leverage China had. And no Champions League revenue, no lucrative TV deal, and inconsequential matchday income meant that these contracts were a ticking time bomb. And the Chinese Football Association knew that, and responded by introducing a salary cap, reducing the amount of foreign players each team could have to 3, and implementing a 100% tax on the signings of those foreign players. The COVID-19 pandemic would send the league into further crisis, and as of 2023, the Super League has lost any shrivel of global relevance it had 7 years ago. But the toughest pill to swallow would be China's failure to qualify for the last 2 consecutive World Cups. Which brings us to what makes Saudi Arabia's situation very different from China. Starting with their standard of football. The Saudi Arabian national team currently sits at number 54 on the FIFA World Rankings, while China's ranking was number 84 back in 2016. Simply put, Saudi Arabia produces better footballers than China does and have qualified for 6 of the last 8 World Cups. They've also won more Asian Cups than China and captured the imagination of their population after beating Argentina and Qatar last fall, 63% of whom, by the way, are under the age of 30 and absolutely football obsessed. Saudi Arabia has a much more solid foundation than China did, and this extends to their finances as well. China sought investment from outside parties to fund their clubs, as evident by sponsor names decorating several team badges, a move they would later rescind in an effort to reduce sponsor involvement, which in turn diminished corporate investment as a whole. Saudi Arabia doesn't have that problem. The public investment fund is an endless pit of cash, intertwined with the economic health of the kingdom itself. This is state-run football in its most literal sense, and when you have an entire country funding your operation, you don't have to settle for Paulinho, Dembele, or Marouane Fellaini. You can sign N'Golo Kante, Karim Benzema, and Cristiano Ronaldo, even if their salaries are astronomical, because their presence on social media alone pays for itself, making globally influential superstars the faces of an economically limitless league in the build-up to a World Cup that aligns perfectly with a nationwide development project might just be the most succinct sports washing spectacle of the 21st century. And at this point, there's not much that you and I can really do, except sit here and watch the price of football go higher and higher, as we witness the beautiful game on the brink of being sold to the highest bidder, whether we like it or not. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, and smash the like button for more video essays like these. And for more summer content, you can click right here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Till next time.